The silence was the first sign. Not the engineered quiet of a vessel running on minimal power, a state defined by the soft, rhythmic hum of life support and the distant thrum of the fusion reactor, but a dead silence. It was a profound and absolute void, a quality of nothingness that swallowed comm signals and left a hole in the electromagnetic spectrum where a civilization should have been. For 3 weeks, the colony on Cygnus X1's third planet, a terraformed rock named New Damascus, had been silent. No automated shipping reports from its orbital docks, no encrypted administrative chatter between its planetary government and the colonial authority, not even a stray, pirated civilian broadcast of some ancient Earth sport. The United Nations ship Vanguard, the last of her heavy cruiser class and a relic of a fleet long since turned to scrap in memory, had been diverted from its patrol route to investigate. The mission parameters were deceptively simple. Re-establish contact, determine the cause of the communications outage, and render aid if necessary. A milk run, the Admiralty's communique had called it. A chance for a veteran crew to cycle through some low-risk, deep space maneuvers before their final decommissioning. Commander Eva Rostova knew there was no such thing as a low-risk maneuver. Not in this lonely, indifferent stretch of the galaxy. She stood on the command bridge, a stark, circular room, where the only illumination came from the holographic displays that floated like captive nebulae in the recycled air. The main view screen, a vast, curved wall of armored transparency, dominated the space, looking out onto an uninterrupted blackness pricked with the cold, distant fire of stars. At this range, Cygnus X1 was a brilliant, violent pinprick, its light too far away to offer any warmth. A lighthouse marking a shore of unknown dangers. Rostova was a tall woman, built with the lean, hard lines of someone who had spent more of her life in the unforgiving embrace of variable gravity than on the stable ground of a planet. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe regulation knot, and her eyes, the color of faded slate, missed nothing. They were the eyes of a survivor, eyes that had watched the fleet she was raised in, burned to incandescent ash against the swirling clouds of Titan. Rostova said, "Anything." Her voice was low and calm, a practiced quiet that cut through the low thrum of the bridge with an authority that needed no volume. Her second-in-command, Sub-Commander Kalin, stood at the primary sensor station, his own tense reflection a ghost in the polished chrome of the console. He was younger than Rostova, a product of the post-war academy, with a face that hadn't yet learned how to fully mask its anxieties. Kalin said, "Negative, Commander. We're hailing on all colonial frequencies. Standard, emergency, and even the old maritime bands they insisted on using for their atmospheric fishing skiffs. Nothing. It's like the planet's entire comm array was surgically removed from space-time." Rostova crossed the deck, her magnetic boots clicking with soft, deliberate precision against the metallic floor. She leaned over Kalin's shoulder, her gaze sweeping across the cascading data streams. Waveform analyses, spectral diffusion patterns, neutrino scatter plots. All of them were unnervingly flat. Clean, too clean. Rostova asked, "No residual radiation? No ion trails from a solar flare or a micrometeoroid shower impacting their satellite network?" Kalin shook his head, a muscle twitching in his jaw. He said, "None. The system is unnaturally quiet. The background radiation is significantly lower than the standard galactic mean for a system of this type. It's as if a sphere of absolute null energy passed through and scrubbed it clean of everything but gravity." Rostova straightened, her mind sifting through 1,000 chilling possibilities. Solar phenomena, a cascading, colony-wide systems failure, a new exotic form of stellar interference. But none of them fit the data. The silence felt deliberate. It felt predatory. She said, "Take us in closer, Kalen." Silent running. Power down all non-essential systems and vent plasma into the magnetic containment buffer. I don't want us broadcasting any more energy than a passing comet. Kalen replied, "Aye, Commander." His fingers moved across the holographic controls with practiced speed. The ship's ambient hum deepened as the main fusion reactor throttled down, the lights on the bridge dimming to a moody, operational twilight. The UNS Vanguard slipped forward, a 900-meter shard of gray, weapon-scarred metal and quiet purpose, a ghost moving through a graveyard. Hours bled into one another, each one marked by the silent, forward creep of the ship. The ship crept towards New Damascus, a blue and green marble that grew steadily in the view screen, a jewel of impossible life in the sterile black. From this distance, it looked serene, perfect. The orbital scans, however, told a different, horrifying story. The planet's surface was wrong. The sprawling megalopolis of Ethelberg, which should have been a glittering lacework of lights on the northern continent, was completely dark. The vast agricultural plains of the southern hemisphere, a carefully engineered patchwork of vibrant greens and golds, were a uniform, sickly, decaying brown. Rostova asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Life signs?" Kalen's face was pale, his skin a ghostly canvas in the glow of his screen. He said, "I'm reading trace microbials, some extremophil bacteria in the deep sea trenches. Nothing more complex. The entire terrestrial biosphere has been scoured. Flora, fauna, everything. Gone." A cold dread, heavy and suffocating as a lead blanket, settled over the bridge. This was not a natural disaster. This was an extermination, methodical and absolute. Rostova asked, "And the colonists? The infrastructure?" Kalen's voice was strained, tight with disbelief. He said, "No bodies, no mass graves, no infrastructure damage either. The cities are intact. The spaceport, the comms tower, it's all still there. Just empty. The atmospheric composition is wrong too. Nitrogen and carbon dioxide levels are spiking. The free oxygen is being stripped away, converted into something else. It's a terraforming process, but in reverse." Rostova stared at the dying world on the screen. This was a weapon she couldn't comprehend. Not a bomb that shattered cities and glassed continents, but a subtle, insidious plague that unraveled biology at a molecular level. A weapon that erased life and left the infrastructure behind, like a predator that meticulously licked the bones clean for its own use. She said, "Scan for energy signatures, active or residual. Whatever did this must have left a trace." For a long, tense time, there was nothing. The Vanguard's powerful sensors swept the system, tasting the void for any hint of alien technology. Then, a single faint signal pinged on Kalen's console. It was a neutrino emission, so faint it was almost lost in the background noise of the local star. It was coming from the planet's L1 Lagrange point, the gravitationally stable region between New Damascus and its sun, the precise location where the colony had parked its deep space communications relay. Kalen announced, his voice tight with a mixture of fear and professional excitement. "Got something? A repeating signal. It's not a standard communication protocol. It's more like a heartbeat, a power source cycling on and off with perfect regularity." Rostova commanded, "Put it on the main screen. Maximum magnification." The view screen shifted, the image of the dead planet shrinking as the field of view zoomed in on the L1 point. At first, There was only the star field, a static tapestry of distant suns. Then, the ship's optical sensors, compensating for the glare of Cygnus X-1, began to resolve an object. It was a ship, but like none Rostova had ever seen in any recognition database. It was vast, easily 10 times the size of the Vanguard, and shaped like a shard of obsidian, all sharp angles and non-Euclidean geometry. Its surface was a chaotic lattice of crystalline structures and metallic, rib-like spars, giving it the unsettling appearance of a fossilized, deep-sea leviathan. It was utterly alien, and it was utterly still. Kalin stated the obvious, his voice low. It's not responding to hails. No active emissions, apart from that neutrino pulse. It's playing dead, Rostova said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. It's a trap. They sterilized the planet, and they left the ship here as bait, to draw in anyone who came to investigate the silence. As if her words were the trigger, the alien vessel woke up. The rhythmic neutrino heartbeat stopped. The crystalline structures on its hull began to glow with an internal, sickly green light, pulsing like diseased organs. Ports and fissures, previously invisible, opened along its length, and a swarm of smaller ships, 100 or more, poured out like hornets from a disturbed nest. They were as chaotic and asymmetrical as the mothership. Jagged fighters that moved with an unnatural, darting speed that seemed to defy inertia. Kalin yelled, his professional calm shattering into raw alarm. Multiple contacts. They're launching fighters. They're moving to surround us. Alarms blared through the Vanguard, a cacophony of shrieking sirens and automated, dispassionate warnings. The bridge was bathed in the stark, flashing red of combat alert. Rostova snapped, her voice a whip crack in the chaos. Bring the reactor to full power. Raise shields. Charge weapon capacitors. All hands to battle stations. The ship shuddered as the fusion reactor roared back to life. A caged star awakening in its core. The view screen became a maelstrom of light and motion as the alien fighters closed in with terrifying speed. They didn't fire conventional weapons like lasers or projectiles. Instead, they projected lances of the same green energy that pulsed from their mothership. Beams that impacted the Vanguard's shields not with explosive force, but with a corrosive, eating effect. The shield integrity percentage on the main display began to drop at an alarming rate. The numbers ticking down like a clock, counting to their doom. The weapons officer shouted, his voice strained with panic. Their weapons are bypassing the kinetic barriers. It's a phased energy weapon, designed to destabilize the shield matrix itself. Rostova ordered, return fire. Target the lead fighters. Salvo fire, railguns, and plasma cannons. The Vanguard's own weapons batteries, relics of a war fought a generation ago, opened up. Tungsten slugs, accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light, streaked across the void, invisible until they impacted. They were followed by bolts of incandescent plasma, bright spears of contained fusion. But the alien fighters were impossibly agile. They jinked and swerved, their movements not governed by the predictable laws of Newtonian physics, but by some other, more complex calculus of motion. Most of the shots missed, sailing harmlessly into the black. The few that hit seemed to do little damage, splashing harmlessly against some unseen energy field that flickered around their jagged hulls. Kalin reported, his voice tight with strain. Their shields are adaptive. They're analyzing our weapon frequencies and modulating their defenses in real time. Each shot is less effective than the last. They were outmaneuvered and outgunned. A textbook ambush, executed with chilling perfection. Rostova's mind raced, her tactical brain processing 1,000 variables a second. A direct fight was suicide. Escape was the only option. But the alien mothership was a wall in space, blocking their primary jump vector, the calculated safe path back to friendly space. They had to create an opening. Rostova said, her voice dropping back into that preternatural calm that settled on her in moments of extreme crisis. Kalen, give me a trajectory that takes us into the planet's upper atmosphere. A high-G slingshot maneuver. Use the gravity well to fling us out on a new vector. Kalen's head snapped around, his eyes wide with disbelief. He said, Commander, the atmospheric stress at that speed. The ship could be torn apart. The friction would overwhelm the shields in seconds. Rostova countered, her eyes locked on the tactical display where red icons swarmed their single blue one. The shields are already failing. Their weapons are designed for the vacuum of space. They'll be less effective in an atmosphere where the energy will diffuse and scatter. It's our only chance. Plot the course. For a moment, Kalen hesitated, a conflict of training and terror on his face. Then he nodded, his fingers flying across his console. He said, course laid in. It's tight. The margin for error is less than a single percentage point. Rostova said, make it work. She opened a channel to the entire ship, her voice calm and steady, a rock in the storm of alarms. This is the commander. We are executing a high-velocity atmospheric entry. Brace for extreme turbulence and gravitational stress. The Vanguard shuddered as its main engines fired at maximum, desperate thrust. The ship pivoted, a wounded giant diving towards the sickly brown globe of New Damascus. The alien fighters, seemingly surprised by the suicidal maneuver, swarmed in pursuit. The ship hit the outer layers of the atmosphere like a stone skipping across water. A violent, shuddering impact that threw crew members from their feet. The view screen turned from black to a searing, incandescent orange as the air friction ignited into a plasma sheath around the vessel. The entire ship screamed, the metal groaning under the impossible strain. On the bridge, consoles sparked and shorted out, and crew members held on as the deck pitched and rolled like a storm-tossed boat on an ancient sea. The alien energy lances weakened in the dense air, just as Rostova had predicted, their coherent energy scattering into beautiful, deadly auroras. But the fighters themselves were relentless, flying dangerously close, their own smaller forms buffeted by the atmospheric chaos. The Vanguard, a vessel designed for the cold, clean vacuum of space, was fighting for its life against the very planet it had come to save. Kalen yelled over the roar of the protesting ship. Altitude dropping. Structural integrity at 80% and falling. We're losing hull plating on the lower decks. Rostova commanded, her knuckles white where she gripped the arms of her command chair. Stay on course. Bring us around the gravity well. Now. The ship banked hard, a gut-wrenching turn that sent loose objects flying across the bridge and pinned the crew to their seats with crushing G-forces. For a terrifying, eternal moment, it felt as if the ship would fail, that its spine would snap under the colossal forces. Then, they were through. The Vanguard burst out of the upper atmosphere, a phoenix reborn in fire, flung out from the planet's gravity like a stone from a sling. They were free of the atmospheric drag, accelerating away from the planet on a new, unplanned trajectory, deeper into unknown space. The swarm of alien fighters, not designed for such extreme atmospheric maneuvers, had been scattered and damaged. Several had been destroyed entirely, tumbling end over end as they burned up in the atmosphere. But the mothership, the great, dark Leviathan, was now turning to follow. It was slower, more ponderous, but it was relentless. The Vanguard was alive, but it was crippled. The hull was breached in a dozen locations. The main reactor was unstable, its containment fields flickering like a dying candle. And they were flying blind, away from home, with a vastly superior enemy on their tail. The silence of New Damascus was behind them. Ahead, there was only the silence of the unknown, and the cold, certain knowledge that they were being hunted. They had survived the trap, but they had stumbled into the hunting grounds of a predator that had just begun to play with its food. In the strained quiet of the aftermath, the bridge was a scene of controlled chaos. Emergency teams in heavy-duty exoskeletons moved through the space, their metallic limbs clanking as they extinguished electrical fires and sealed micro-fractures in the bulkheads with quick foam sealant. The air was thick with the acrid smell of ozone and burnt wiring. Rostova stood before the main view screen, which now showed the starfield behind them. The alien mothership was a distant, menacing shape, but it was growing steadily larger, a patient predator closing the distance. They had gained some time, but not enough. Rostova said, her voice flat. Damage report. Kalen, his face smudged with soot, looked up from his console. He said, severe. Hull integrity is at 62%. The atmospheric pass sheared off the primary long-range sensor array and 2 of the aft weapon emplacements. The main reactor's containment field is fluctuating. Engineering says they can stabilize it, but we can't risk another full-power burn. We're running on fumes. He paused, then added the final, grim detail. And the primary FTL drive is offline. The energy surge from the atmospheric entry, combined with the feedback from their weapons, fried the navigation computer. We can't calculate a jump. Stranded, the word hung in the air, unspoken but felt by everyone on the bridge. They were a wounded animal, bleeding energy into the void, with the hunter closing in. A new voice said, we have one other option. Rostova turned. Doctor. Eris Thorne stood in the doorway of the bridge, his slight frame and soft civilian clothes looking utterly out of place amidst the military hardware and damage control teams. Thorne was a civilian, a theoretical physicist who had been assigned to the Vanguard for its final tour, a political concession to the science lobby. He was a man of soft hands and softer sweaters, his mind a universe of abstract equations and quantum possibilities. He was the architect of Project Cessation, a technology so radical and so dangerous that the Admiralty had classified it, built it, and then promptly buried it in the Vanguard's most shielded engineering bay, hoping it would never be used. Rostova said, her tone guarded. Doctor, this is not the time for theoretical discussions. Thorne insisted, stepping onto the bridge. He carried a data slate, which he held up as if it were a shield against the harsh reality of their situation. He said, this is precisely the time. The cessation drive is our only way out. You know what it can do. Rostova knew. She had read the classified files, her security clearance giving her access to the fleet's darkest secrets. The cessation drive was not a propulsion system. It didn't move the ship through space. It manipulated causality. According to Thorne's theories, it could create a localized bubble of quantum foam around the ship, a pocket universe where the laws of cause and effect became suggestions. Within that bubble, the ship could exist in a state of superposition, exploring multiple potential actions and their outcomes simultaneously, before collapsing the waveform and committing to a single, chosen reality. It was a weapon of prediction, a way to see the future and choose the one you wanted. But the energy requirements were astronomical, and the risks were unthinkable. A miscalculation could create a paradox that could unravel the ship at a subatomic level, or worse, create a runaway causality event that could destabilize an entire region of space-time. Kalen interjected, his voice sharp with disbelief. The drive has never been tested. It's a theory held together by equations and wishful thinking. Activating it would be suicide. Thorne countered, his eyes bright with a feverish, desperate intensity. Staying here is suicide. The Recall, as you've designated them, are coming. They will be here in less than 4 hours. Their weapons are superior. Their ships are more maneuverable. In a conventional engagement, we will be destroyed. The cessation drive is a gamble, but it is a gamble that offers a chance of survival. Inaction offers none. Rostova looked from Thorne's desperate hope to Kalen's pragmatic fear. Both were right. She walked to the center of the bridge, her gaze fixed on the image of the approaching Recall vessel. Her career had been defined by a single, catastrophic decision at the Battle of Titan, where a by-the-book, cautious maneuver had led to the loss of 3 cruisers and over 5,000 lives. She had been cleared of wrongdoing, but the guilt was a weight she carried every day. She had sworn to never again let rigid doctrine lead her crew to their deaths. She asked, "Dr. Thorne, you believe your drive can get us out of this?" Thorne corrected her. "I believe it can show us the way. It can't perform the actions for us. We would still need to fly the ship. But it can analyze every possible maneuver, every weapon discharge, every potential enemy reaction, and show us the one path, however narrow, that leads to survival." Kalen pressed. And the risks, the paradoxes, the ship being torn apart from the inside out? Thorne admitted, the risks are significant. The temporal strain on the crew could be disorienting. We might experience echoes, glimpses of the paths not taken. But the containment fields are theoretically sound. The ship should hold together. Rostova made her decision. She said, "Doctor, Thorne, go to engineering. Begin the power-up sequence for the cessation drive. Kalen, you're with me. We need to prepare the crew for something they won't understand." Kalen looked at her, his face a mask of protest. He said, "Commander, I must formally object. This is an unnecessary risk. We should be focusing our efforts on repairing the FTL drive." Rostova's voice left no room for argument. "Your objection is noted, Sub-Commander. But we don't have time to repair the FTL drive. The Arcal are coming. We will face them on our terms, not theirs. Now, carry out your orders." Kalen held her gaze for a long moment, a silent battle of wills passing between them. Then he gave a stiff, reluctant nod. He said, "Aye, Commander." As Thorne and Kalen left the bridge, Rostova turned back to the view screen. She was staking the lives of her crew, the last human warship, on a madman's theory. It was a desperate, reckless gamble. It was the kind of decision that ended careers and filled memorial walls. But it was a choice. And after the helplessness of the ambush, a choice felt like a weapon in itself. The Vanguard was no longer just running. It was preparing to change the rules of the game. The heart of the cessation drive was not a machine, but a chamber. It was located deep within the ship's engineering section. A spherical room whose walls were lined with a crystalline, iridescent material that seemed to drink the light. At the center of the chamber, suspended in a web of magnetic containment fields, was a perfect sphere of absolute blackness. It was a stabilized quantum singularity, a pinprick of space-time so dense that it bent reality around it. This was the engine of Thorne's device. Thorne stood at a console outside the chamber, his fingers dancing across the controls. The air hummed with a rising tide of energy, a sound that was felt as much as heard. A deep, resonant vibration that seemed to emanate from the very atoms of the ship. Rostova stood beside him, watching the energy readings climb. Thorn announced, his voice tight with anticipation. "The core is charged. We're approaching the threshold for bubble formation. Once we cross it, the effects will begin." Rostova asked, "What should we expect?" Thorn said, "Disorientation. A sense of temporal dissonance. You might see things. Flickers of movement in your peripheral vision. Hear voices. These are what I call causality echoes. The ghosts of alternate possibilities bleeding through. It's essential that the crew remains focused on their tasks. The bridge crew, especially. They will be the anchor that keeps us grounded in the primary reality." Rostova keyed her calm. Her voice was broadcast throughout the ship. She said, "All hands, this is the commander. We are about to engage an experimental system. You may experience some sensory distortions. Remain calm, trust your instruments, and follow your training." "Rostova out?" Thorn asked, his hand hovering over the final activation control. "Ready, Commander?" Rostova nodded. She said, "Engage." Thorn activated the drive. The black sphere in the chamber pulsed once, a silent beat of impossible gravity. The humming intensified, rising in pitch until it was a piercing, high-frequency whine that vibrated in their teeth. And then, the world tilted on its axis. On the bridge, the first echo hit. For a fraction of a second, the view screen showed not the approaching Rakal's ship, but the Vanguard, intact and gleaming, docked at a starbase orbiting a vibrant blue Earth. The crew was disembarking for shore leave, their faces relaxed and smiling. Kalen gasped, stumbling back from his console, his hand reaching for a memory that wasn't his. Then the image vanished, replaced by the stark reality of their situation. Rostova's voice, broadcast from engineering, cut through the confusion. "Report," Kalen stammered, shaking his head to clear the phantom image. We were home." Rostova's voice was calm and reassuring. "It's an echo, Kalen. A possible future that we are no longer on the path to. Ignore it. Focus on the now." "Dr. Thorn, is the bubble stable?" Thorn's voice replied, strained but steady. "It is. The causality field is established. We are now in a state of quantum superposition. I'm linking the drive's predictive analytics to the main tactical display." On the main screen, the image of the Rakal's ship was suddenly overlaid with 1,000 translucent, ghost-like images. Each one represented a potential future. In some, the Vanguard was destroyed in a flash of green light. In others, it was crippled and adrift, its crew slowly suffocating. But in a handful, a very small handful, it survived. These paths glowed with a faint, golden light, threads of hope in a tapestry of doom. Thorn explained, "The drive is mapping all possibilities. It's showing us the paths to survival. We just have to choose one and make it real." The Rakal mothership was now close enough for its weapon ports to be visible. It began to launch another wave of fighters, a swarm of angry, jagged insects. Kalen reported, his voice regaining its professional edge. "They're launching a full assault." Thorn said, "The drive is analyzing their attack patterns. It's recommending a course of action, a high G burn to starboard, combined with a targeted railgun strike on the lead fighter in the 5th Attack Wing." Kalen asked, "Why that specific fighter?" Thorn replied, "The drive predicts its destruction will cause a chain reaction. The resulting explosion will create a temporary blind spot in their sensor net, allowing us to slip past their main attack wave." It was absurdly specific. It felt like madness. like trying to navigate a hurricane by predicting the path of a single raindrop. But it was the only path that glowed gold. Rostova ordered, "Execute the maneuver." The Vanguard's engines fired. The ship lurched to starboard, the crew groaning under the sudden acceleration. The railguns fired a single, precise shot. The tungsten slug crossed the void and struck the designated fighter. The small ship vanished in a silent, brilliant flash of light. The explosion, exactly as predicted, momentarily blinded the other fighters in its wing, causing them to break formation in confusion. The Vanguard shot through the gap they had created, the Arcal energy lances searing the space where the ship had been a second before. They were through the first wave, but the mothership was now firing its main weapon, a colossal beam of green energy that was capable of cracking a planet's crust. Thorne said, his voice strained with the effort of interpreting the flood of data. "The drive is showing us a way to counter it. We need to vent plasma from the main reactor directly into the path of the beam." Kalen shouted, "That's insane! The feedback could overload the reactor and destroy the ship." Thorne countered, "The drive predicts a 78% chance that the plasma will interact with their energy beam, creating a resonance cascade that will disable their weapon for precisely 12.4 seconds. It's the only golden path." Rostova commanded, "Do it." In engineering, a chief petty officer, her face grim and set, manually opened the emergency plasma vents. A torrent of superheated, magnetically contained gas erupted from the Vanguard's belly. It hit the Rakal energy beam, and the void ignited. A storm of incandescent energy, a miniature sun, bloomed between the two ships. The Rakal beam sputtered and died, its emitter glowing a dull cherry red from the overload. 12 seconds. It was a tiny window, but it was enough. Rostova yelled, "Now, take us past them." Maximum sublight thrust. The Vanguard surged forward, flying directly into the blinding glare of the plasma storm. It emerged on the other side, having passed the Rakal mothership. They had done it. They had survived a battle they should have lost. They were not safe, but they were alive. As the ship sped away, Rostova ordered the cessation drive powered down. The disorienting hum faded, the temporal echoes receded, and the world snapped back into a single, solid reality. The crew on the bridge slumped in their seats, exhausted and trembling, the adrenaline of the battle leaving them weak and shaky. They had survived, but Rostova knew this was just the beginning. They had a new weapon, a way to fight back. But they were still one ship, alone in the dark. And now they had the full attention of an enemy whose power they were only just beginning to comprehend. As the Vanguard fled into the unknown, Rostova's comms officer intercepted a stray, wideband transmission from the Arcal ship. It wasn't a threat or a challenge. It was a lament, a broadcast of grief and desperation, a prayer sent out to a dead god. She had the ship's computer translated. The message was simple and chilling. The great blight consumes all. We seek a new home. The harvest must continue. We must survive. The Rakal were not conquerors. They were refugees. And the Vanguard had just declared war on a species that was already fighting for its own extinction. The moral calculus of their mission had just become infinitely more complex. The days that followed were a blur of frantic repairs and tense silence. The Vanguard limped through the void, a wounded beast seeking a place to hide and lick its wounds. They found refuge in the swirling, radioactive chaos of a stellar nursery, a nebula where newborn stars threw off enough energy and exotic particles to mask their signature from the Rakal. Here, surrounded by the majestic, silent violence of cosmic creation, the crew worked to piece their ship and their new reality back together. Rostova spent most of her time in the ship's small, Spartan briefing room, staring at the translated Rakal lament, the Great Blight. The words suggested a plague, a biological or technological contagion that was consuming their civilization. It explained their methods, the way they scoured worlds of life, leaving the infrastructure intact. They weren't destroying worlds. They were preparing them for resettlement, sterilizing them for their own kind. It was a monstrous act, born of a monstrous desperation. Thorne said, joining her in the briefing room. He had lost weight, his already thin frame looking almost skeletal. The strain of operating the cessation drive had taken a toll on him. He said, "We can't judge them by our standards. Their entire species is on the brink of extinction. Their actions are horrific, but from their perspective, they are necessary for survival." Kalen countered, his arms crossed over his chest. He had been a constant, brooding presence since the battle, his disapproval of Rostova's methods a palpable force. He said, "That doesn't give them the right to annihilate humanity. They are a threat, and we need to find a way to neutralize them." Rostova said, her voice quiet. "Neutralize them? We are one damaged cruiser. They are an armada. We survived one encounter through a desperate gamble. We won't be so lucky a second time. We need to understand them, not just fight them." Her words were met with a tense silence. The moral chasm between Kalen's military pragmatism and Thorne's philosophical detachment was widening, and Rostova was caught in the middle. Her duty was to protect her crew and, by extension, what was left of humanity. But the Rakal lament had changed things. She could not, in good conscience, wage a war of annihilation against a species that was already dying. Their chance to learn more came unexpectedly. A long-range sensor, jury-rigged by the engineering team, picked up a faint, repeating signal from a nearby asteroid field. It was a Rakal distress beacon. A single small ship, likely a scout or a fighter, was damaged and calling for aid. Kalen said immediately, "It's another trap. They know we're in this sector. They're trying to draw us out." Rostova said, her eyes on the tactical display, "Perhaps. Or perhaps it's exactly what it appears to be. A ship in distress. The Rakal may be a horde, but they are not a hive mind. There must be individuals. Individuals who can be reasoned with." Kalen asked, incredulous, "You're not seriously considering a rescue mission?" Rostova corrected him. "I'm considering an intelligence-gathering mission. We need to know more about their technology, their biology, their command structure. A captured ship, a captured crew member, that could give us the leverage we need to survive." She turned to Thorne. "Can the cessation drive be used to predict their response if we approach?" Thorne nodded slowly. He said, "Yes. We can run a simulation, create a causality bubble around the target vessel, and explore the potential outcomes of a first contact scenario. But it will be risky. A sustained, focused use of the drive is more dangerous than the short bursts we used in combat." Rostova said, "We have to take that risk. Prepare the drive. Kalen, assemble a small covert boarding team. We're going hunting." The Vanguard approached the asteroid field under silent running. The damaged Rakal ship was wedged between two massive, slowly tumbling chunks of iron and rock. It was a small, jagged vessel, the same type as the fighters that had attacked them. But its engine section was dark, and a long, ugly gash ran along its hull. Thorne reported from engineering. "The cessation drive is active. The bubble is stable. I am projecting the primary probability streams to your command console, Commander. On the bridge, Rostova watched as the tactical displays shimmered. Ghostly images of the Vanguard and the Rakal ship played out a dozen different scenarios. In most, the Rakal ship self-destructed upon their approach. In others, it transmitted their position to the main fleet. But one path, a narrow, flickering golden thread, showed a successful boarding action. Rostova said, pointing to the golden path, "There. It requires a precise, high-speed approach from the asteroid's shadow, and a plasma charge to disable their external sensors moments before the boarding team attaches. It's a 1 in 100 shot," Kalen said, his voice grim. He was leading the boarding team himself, clad in a sleek, black environmental suit. He said, "Then we'll have to be perfect." The Vanguard moved like a predator, using the tumbling asteroids as cover. They executed the maneuver flawlessly, the plasma charge disabling the Rakal ship's sensors without triggering an alarm. Kalen's team, launched from a torpedo tube in modified breaching pods, crossed the short distance between the ships and attached to the damaged hull. The interior of the Rakal ship was a disorienting maze of crystalline walls and pulsing organic conduits. The air was thick with a strange, ozone-like smell. They found the pilot in the small, cramped cockpit. It was a single being, tall and slender, its body a fusion of organic flesh and crystalline cybernetics. It was unconscious, slumped over the controls. As they moved the pilot, it began to stir. Its eyes, multifaceted like a fly's, snapped open. It let out a high-pitched, chittering cry, a sound of pure terror, and tried to activate a device on its wrist. One of Kalen's team members stunned it with a low-power phaser blast. They brought the Rakal pilot and a wealth of data from the ship's computer back to the Vanguard. The mission was a success. But as Rostova watched the unconscious alien being transported to the medical bay, she felt a profound sense of unease. They had crossed a line. They were no longer just soldiers defending themselves. They were captors. And the path they were on was growing darker with every step. The Rakal pilot was named Xylar. It took the ship's computer, aided by the data from the captured vessel, 3 days to create a rudimentary translation matrix. The first conversation took place in the medical bay, with Xylar conscious but restrained by a light energy field. Rostova, Thorn, and Kalen stood on the other side of a transparent aluminum wall. Xylar was not a warrior. It was an engineer. Its ship had been damaged during a plasma storm in the nebula, not in combat. It was terrified, disoriented, and convinced it was about to be dissected. Rostova said, her translated voice emerging from a speaker in the medical bay, "The Great Blight. What is it?" Xylar flinched at the words. Through the translator, its chittering voice was rendered as a series of pained, static-laced clicks. It said, "It is the unraveling, the end of all things, a plague of nanites, born of our own hubris. It consumes all organic matter, converting it into more of itself. It took our homeworld in a single cycle. We fled in anything that could fly. We are all that is left." Rostova said, "So you seek new worlds, and you kill the inhabitants to make them your own." Xylar clicked, a strange note of indignation in its voice. "We do not kill. We harvest. The blight cannot be stopped. It is relentless. It follows us through the void. Our only hope is to find a world, cleanse it of its native biology, and resettle before the blight finds us again. The cleansing is regrettable, but it is necessary. It is the survival of our species." A horrifying picture began to form in Rostova's mind. The Rakal were not just refugees. They were carriers of a doomsday weapon, a gray goo apocalypse that they were spreading unintentionally across the galaxy. Kalen said, his voice hard. The mothership, the matriarch. She leads you. Xylar confirmed. The matriarch of the first brood. She guides the fleet. She chooses the harvest worlds. She holds the last of our pure genetic material, the hope of a new beginning. Thorn, who had been silent, stepped forward. He asked, his voice filled with a scientist's curiosity. Your technology, your ships, your energy weapons, they are based on crystalline resonance. How? Xylar seemed to hesitate, then it clicked. We do not build. We grow. Our technology is symbiotic, a fusion of organic life and silicon crystal. It is how we have always been. This was the key. Their technology, their biology, their very existence was a fusion of the organic and the inorganic. And the Great Blight was a plague that targeted only the organic. It was a perfect, tailored weapon against them. Kalen said, turning to Rostova, we have to warn Earth. If even one of their ships reaches the inner systems, if the Blight is released, it would be the end of everything. Rostova said, her mind racing, we can't send a message without revealing our position, and we can't fight them. We have to find another way. She looked at Thorn. She said, the cessation drive. You said it manipulates causality. Can it do more than just predict? Can it change things? Thorn's eyes widened as he understood her question. He said, you mean use it on the Blight itself? Theoretically, it might be possible. The Blight is a swarm of nanites operating on a simple program directive. If we could create a causality bubble around it, we might be able to introduce a new directive. A paradox. A command that would force it to stop consuming or even reverse the process. Kalen protested. It's too dangerous. We could make it worse, accelerate it. Mutate it into something that consumes inorganic matter as well. Rostova said, her voice filled with a desperate conviction. Or we could end it. We could save them. And in doing so, save ourselves. It was a plan born of madness and hope. A plan to use a reality-bending weapon to cure a species-ending plague. It was a gamble on a cosmic scale. But it was the only path Rostova could see that didn't end in annihilation, for them or for the Rakal. She said, her voice broadcast into the medical bay, Xylar, we believe we can help you. We believe we can stop the Blight. The Rakal engineer was silent for a long moment. Then, a single, hesitant click came through the translator. It asked, how? Rostova said, trust us. And as she said the words, she knew that she was asking for the impossible. She was asking a victim to trust its attacker, a refugee to trust the person who had just taken them captive. She was asking for a leap of faith across a chasm of fear and violence. The fate of two species rested on whether or not that chasm could be bridged. The plan was audacious to the point of insanity. They would use Xylar's distress beacon, modified to carry a new message, to lure the Rakal mothership to a specific location, a gravitationally stable point within a dense field of protostars. There, amidst the raw, untamed energy of stellar birth, the vanguard would attempt the impossible. They would use the cessation drive not as a shield or a predictive tool, but as a weapon of creation. They would try to rewrite the fundamental code of the Great Blight. Xylar, against all odds, had agreed to help. It had seen the cold, hard logic in Rostova's plan, the desperate hope that mirrored its own. It worked with Thorn and the engineering team, its unique understanding of crystalline technology proving invaluable in fine-tuning the cessation drive. They discovered that the drive's causality bubble could be tuned to a specific quantum frequency, allowing it to target the nanites of the blight without affecting other organic matter. Kalen remained opposed, his skepticism a constant grounding force against the heady tide of theoretical possibility. He argued to Rostova in the privacy of her ready room. "You're trusting a prisoner of war. You're betting the survival of our species on the word of an alien who was, until a few days ago, part of a horde that was actively trying to exterminate us." Rostova countered, "I'm betting on the fact that they want to survive as much as we do. And I'm betting on you, Kalen. I need you to believe in this. I need my crew to see that we are united. If we are divided, we will fail." Her words struck a chord. Kalen, for all his by-the-book rigidity, was loyal. He did not agree with the plan, but he would execute his part in it flawlessly. The trap was set. Xylar's modified beacon was activated. The message it sent was a complex piece of deception, a data packet containing false sensor readings of a pristine garden world ripe for the harvest, a world that could only be reached through the treacherous protostar field. It was a bait too tempting for the desperate Rakal to ignore. They waited. For 2 days, the Vanguard sat in the heart of the stellar nursery, a silent, patient hunter. The ship was a tinderbox of tension. The crew, aware of the monumental risk they were about to take, moved with a quiet, focused intensity. Then it came. A single colossal ship, emerging from the swirling dust and gas of the nebula. The Rakal mothership. It moved cautiously, its sensors sweeping the area. It was followed by the rest of the armada, a fleet of smaller, jagged ships that took up defensive positions around their matriarch. Kalen announced on the bridge, his voice tight. "They're here. They're holding position, scanning the area." Rostova said, "They're cautious. They don't see the world from the beacon. They suspect a trap." She opened a channel to the Arkal ship, a wide, unencrypted broadcast. "This is Commander Eva Rostova of the United Nations ship Vanguard. We mean you no harm. We have your engineer, Xylar. It is alive and well. We believe we can help you. We believe we can stop the Great Blight." The Rakal fleet remained silent. But on the Vanguard sensors, a flurry of encrypted communication erupted between the ships. They were confused, debating. Kalen said, "They don't believe us." Rostova said, "Then we'll have to show them." She turned to Thorn, who was stationed on the bridge for this final act. "Doctor, it's time." Thorn nodded, his face pale but resolute. He said, "Engaging the cessation drive. Targeting the mothership. This is going to be the most complex bubble we've ever created. I'm going to try to isolate the ship and a small margin of the space around it to contain any potential blowback." The now familiar hum of the drive filled the ship. The world tilted. But this time, the effect was different. Instead of ghostly echoes, the crew felt a profound sense of connection, a strange, empathic link to the Rakal ship. They could feel its fear, its suspicion, its desperate, flickering hope. Within the causality bubble, time dilated. To the universe outside, only a few seconds would pass. To the occupants of the two ships, it could be an eternity. Rostova opened the channel again. She said, her voice calm and steady, "Matriarch, we are not your enemies. We are, like you, survivors. We are about to attempt to cure the plague that haunts you. We ask only that you watch." She then gave the order, "Thorn, target the blight." This was the most dangerous part of the plan. To cure the blight, they needed a sample of it. Xylar had explained that the matriarch's ship was a sanctuary, a clean vessel that carried the last uninfected members of their species. But the other ships in the fleet were not so lucky. They were filled with the infected, their bodies slowly being consumed by the nanites. The cessation drive, guided by Thorne's frantic calculations, reached out. It created a micro-wormhole, a tiny, fleeting tunnel through space-time that connected the causality bubble to one of the infected recall ships. It siphoned a small, contained sample of the blight nanites into the bubble. The nanites manifested as a shimmering, black cloud, a roiling mass of microscopic machines programmed to do one thing: consume. Thorne said, his voice strained. I have them. Now for the paradox. He began to input a new set of commands into the drive. He was not a biologist, but he was a master of logic. He constructed a simple, elegant paradox, a piece of code that would be irresistible to the Blight's simple AI. The command was this: you must consume all that is not you. But you are now part of us. To consume us is to consume yourself. To consume yourself is to cease to exist. To cease to exist is to fail your primary directive. He fed the paradoxical code into the causality bubble. The black cloud of nanites began to vibrate, to oscillate. It was caught in a logic loop. Its fundamental programming turned against itself. The cloud began to glow, first a dull red, then a bright, searing white. Thorne whispered, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. It's working. The nanites are reconfiguring. They are turning their consumption directive inward, but instead of destroying themselves, they are merging, creating something new. The white light intensified, and then, with a silent flash, it was gone. The black cloud had vanished. In its place, floating in the void of the bubble, was a single, perfect crystalline structure, a lattice of inert, harmless silicon. They had done it. They had not destroyed the blight. They had transformed it. They had turned a plague into a stone. Rostova collapsed the causality bubble. The universe snapped back into its normal, linear flow. The empathic link was severed. The hum of the drive faded. The recall fleet was still there, silent and motionless. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. The Vanguard and the Recall Armada floated in the stellar nursery, two species holding their collective breath. Then, the Recall mothership opened a channel. A new voice came through the translator, a voice that was ancient, powerful, and filled with a profound, weary sadness. It was the matriarch. She said, the words a statement of disbelief. You have cured the unraveling. You have given us back our future. Rostova replied, her voice thick with emotion. We offer you more than that. We offer you a home, not as conquerors, but as neighbors. There are worlds enough for all of us. We can help you find them. We can help you build. The matriarch was silent for a long time. Then she said, we have been refugees for so long. We have forgotten how to be anything else. You have shown us a different path, a path of trust. We will take it. The war was over, not with a bang, but with a quiet, hesitant agreement. The Recall Armada, the terrifying horde that had scoured worlds, was no longer an enemy. They were a convoy of survivors, lost and broken, who had just been given a second chance. The journey back to human space was slow and strange. The Vanguard, the last human warship, led a fleet of alien vessels, a sight that would have been unthinkable only weeks before. They were not prisoners or conquerors. They were allies. The final scene was not a triumphant parade or a medal ceremony. It was a meeting. Rostova, Thorne, and Kalin stood in the Vanguard's main cargo bay, which had been converted into a temporary diplomatic chamber. The airlock hissed open, and the Raquel matriarch entered. She was a towering figure, her crystalline infused body radiating a gentle, internal light. She was ancient, beautiful, and terrifying. She looked at Rostova, her multifaceted eyes holding a wisdom that was millennia old. She said, her voice echoing in the vast chamber, "You have saved my people. You have turned invaders into something else, something more." Rostova said simply, "We saved ourselves. We were all on a path to destruction. We just chose to step off it together." The matriarch extended a long, slender, crystalline hand. Rostova, after a moment's hesitation, reached out and took it. The touch was strange, cool and smooth like polished stone, but there was a faint, organic warmth to it. It was a handshake across a species divide, a fragile, hopeful connection in the vast, indifferent silence of space. The war was over, but the real work, the hard work of building a future together, had just begun. The universe was still a dangerous, unforgiving place. But for the first time in a long time, it felt a little less empty, a little less silent, and a little more full of hope.